Alrighty, so here's one that I talked about back when I put that first video up. This is my barn for, well, I guess we'll start off for the introduction for the Flatlanders that don't know what a bank barn is. This is a bank barn, and it'll make more sense when I walk around the side here, but I'll do that right now. Where we're going to start off is down here on the corner anyhow. And I got to start off with the explanation because you'd be surprised how many people, well, I guess it wouldn't be surprising, but just being from this part of the country where these barns are common, it's kind of surprising how many people have never heard of a bank barn. So what you do is you find yourself a bank like this, and then you dig a square hole in it, and then you make your foundation, and then you build a barn so that your barn's got a basement in it. Or the other way you can build a bank barn, if you do have flat land, is you build your foundation and you build your barn on top of it on flat ground, above ground, and then you can push dirt up against the front or the back of the barn or both. And I've seen guys build drive-through bank barns that way. Those barns are actually usually pretty damn big when they're built like that. But the downside to bank barns is back when they built these things, drainage wasn't really a concern, and when they backfilled the foundation after they got it built, it usually got backfilled with clay. And what does clay like to do? It likes to hold water, and in the winters when it freezed and thawed, it'd push the walls in and stuff, and that's why these barns are kind of hard to maintain, and finding one in this good a shape is kind of hard because usually the foundation has gone to shit and the whole barn's sagging, or it's pushed out of square or whatnot. The farm here was homesteaded in 1891, so the barn's damn near as old as the farm is, and it's still here. And you should have seen this when I first bought it. You couldn't see the front of the barn. You couldn't even, where I'm standing, you couldn't stand because this was literally an entire patch of poison ivy right here. And it was all grown up the side of the barn. And you could barely see the milk house. It was bad. And I couldn't clean this up because if I'd have got into that, I'd be dead. I don't handle poison ivy well. So Dad was in here. That lucky son of a bitch, he could just grab the stuff barehanded and rip it off, and he never gets it. Me, on the other hand, I just have to be downwind of it, and I get it bad. But, and that's my granddad's old new idea, hay loader. We'll talk about that in a minute. So yeah. And this barn is in really good shape for, well, 1897 and 1997. It'd be 100 years, 122 years old, depending on when it was built in 1897. Well, obviously they laid the foundation July 8th, or at least that part of the foundation July 8th, 1897, but I'd assume it probably took him at least a month to build this barn. Actually, I should flip the lights on real quick. Not that it's gonna, it does a little bit, not a lot, but so yeah, this is the upstairs. And if you'll notice, these are not, a lot of times, really on any barn this old, you look at the beams, they're all hand hewn. These are sawn. And this barn was built out of dimensional lumber. And I gotta get around, I got shit packed in here like you wouldn't believe. I gotta get around. Actually, I should get up on the loft, because I can get closer. This is the shitty part about using a GoPro for this is there's no zoom. Bear with me here, I gotta climb. I just built this part of the loft right after Christmas. 3 weeks ago now, 4 weeks ago now, 4 weekends ago now, something like that. So they needed a place to stack straw, and the only loft in here is that corner. When originally there wouldn't have been any loft in here because they would have been stacking loose hay on either side of the main bay. And there's the pulley for the hay fork. For some reason, you'd have thought that this barn is old enough it would have had a trolley in it, but it never did. And if it did, there's no signs of the track ever being up there. So apparently they must have had a pulley hanging. Now you can see that board right there on that rafter, and then they got the same one here. So they probably had another pulley like that over there, and they would just have a rope on the fork, and they'd lift it off of the wagon and just pull it over with the fork and drop it, and didn't need a trolley. But the reason I had to climb up here, if I can do this without falling and dying, that is the name of the lumber yard. And actually, let me turn you upside down because that's the name of the lumber yard in Grand Rapids, where this came from. Daniel M. Company, Grand Rapids, Michigan. That was the lumber yard. And the story I got, because I bought this from the original family, and actually the daughter of the people, the daughter of the second generation that lived here, or the daughter of the third generation, either way, one of the family members lives in that little house. There's a house on that side of that little yellow garage. She lives there, so I got a pretty good story about this place. And the story that got passed down through the family was they bought this barn out of a catalog, and it came down here on the railroad, and the railroad depot, there's her house, and then she's right on the railroad, and the railroad depot is would have been 50 yards that way across the road. So they brought it down on here in the railroad depot, and then hauled it across the road and over here with horses and wagons. So this is a catalog barn, which is why it's all sawn dimensional lumber. And then the siding on it is in really good shape. All the beams are, I mean, they're obviously split because they've dried out over the years, but all the beams are in good shape. It's a really nice barn, and if we're being perfectly honest, the barn is like 90% of the reason that I bought this house. Alright, bear with me here. We're gonna set you back down for a minute so I don't die. And then this, I'm assuming they used it for either like a tack or a little granary or something, but this pair of rooms, because it's like a square, this is not original. The lumber's different than what the rest of the barn's built out of, so this was built at a later date. But yeah, I'm assuming that that's what they would have been using it for, was like a tack room. Or, like I say, most likely they've stored like feed and grain in there. But you can tell some of that lumber's recycled from probably another building or something like that. And obviously they took a door and made a door. We'll go down the basement here in a minute. But so it's obviously old. I'm guessing by the lumber that's probably 40s or 50s. But yeah. And actually it was a bitch, because when I built this loft a few weeks ago, yeah, we got a lot of plows too. When I built this loft a couple weeks ago, you know, took all my measurements for the height of the floor. I just took it out here on because it just so happened that from here to here was the height of a 2x12. So I took all my measurements here, and just to check on this first floor beam that supports the floor on that side. Well, for some damn reason that is not obvious to me, there's that beam there, that beam there, there's a beam there, and then there's like a actual 2" by 4" back when a 2x4 was actually a 2x4, tied into the main beams that hold the roof up on the barn. Every one of those is a 1/4 inch thicker than the last one, so that floor on that side of the loft has a damn bow purposely built into it, and hell if I know why. So I made my loft floor level, and just kind of, I had to cut a 5" section of the floor boards off of their side of the loft to tie my loft into it. So when I ripped that board off, it just so happened to make a really nice filler piece, and I laid it back in and just nailed it in on top of the plywood to kind of cover up that gap a little bit. But so yeah, I'm gonna be stacking straw in here this year because I got 20 acres of wheat out. First time growing wheat, so that's going to be interesting, but we can talk about that later. And since we're here, that's a Model 100 Plowmaster. That's a local plow. This is a Model 100 Plowmaster, a 3-wheeler on steel. This came out of Iowa. This is my dad's 314B. This came out of an auction in Columbia City, Indiana many years ago. I think I was still in it. I think Dad took me out of elementary school when we went to that auction. That tells you how long ago that's been. Now I'm buying it, or now I own a house. That's my Model 100 that we originally bought to pull with my 66. It's been a minute since that's been in the ground. And then that's a Model 134B. Oliver plow that was bought brand new with our 5-speed 60. We got it, that plow was on the bill of sale for the tractor. I want to say that plow was like $175 or something when he bought it brand new in 48. Tells you how much farm equipment is inflated in price. Yeah. And then obviously my Farmall Cub, the barge wagon, everybody's seen that, my 4-wheeler. The Sears SS14 that my granddad bought brand new, and he mowed their yard with it until he bought his Ford LGT 14 diesel, and then Dad mowed his yard with it for years, and now I'm mowing my yard with it. So this thing's been mowing 3 generations of our family's yard. That's a Model 4240 that I just picked up last spring. No, spring before last. That was my neighbor's plow. I watched him plow his garden with that behind his Farmall M for years, and when he passed away, I wanted that plow, so I bought it. And I actually plowed 2 acres with that in my 66 this fall. That was fun. I ain't plowed my 66 in years. And then the Gravity wagon has not made any progress other than being moved over here. So, and the biggest downside of these barns, you got all this headroom, and the way they're built, you can't utilize it because of these guys right here. You can't take those beams out as the barn falls apart. And actually, we couldn't get anything in there when I bought it. They had a beam, well, they had a beam like that from here to there. And those aren't structural. They were just there to help, back when they stacked loose hay in there, that helped clamp the hay and keep it from spilling into your center bay here. But we sawed that out so that I could get stuff over here. Otherwise, this was just useless space. There was one here at one time, and that got taken out a long time ago, so you could have got stuff in here, but much more than my 4-wheeler or a lawnmower, and you'd have never got anything in here. So, and then this is the basement. Oh, and another thing about this is on the center bay, what's that? Washer. On the center bay, the floor is double stacked. It's one by, but they stacked or they layered it to make the floor stronger, so that they could, when they were backing wagons in here. On either side of the center bay, it's just one layer of one by. And then this here's the basement. Need to replace the posts. Well, actually, this is original, and then there would have been another one right. That's the groove where the dovetail would have fit in. There would have been one right here. That's obviously been taken out a long time ago, and they put these damn jack posts in. This was a mess when I bought it. I got one of them big roll around, like, reliable, the like 110 whatever gallon they are roll around trash hoppers they give you when you sign up for trash collection. I filled mine 6 times. It took me 6 weeks to clean this out because I'd come down here, shovel for an hour, fill that can up, and it took me 6 times to get all the stuff cleaned out of here. And that's not counting all the stuff I threw on the burn pile. Because the guy that owned this, well, it would have been the father of the lady I bought this place from, because there was sisters. The one lives across the road and then the other one lived here. He ran a plumbing business out of here, and there was like 4 sets of homemade pigeonholes here that he stuffed all his plumbing fittings and whatnot in. And then that bench was here. This bench was sitting here. There was just shit strung all over. This bench is actually kind of neat. And I think it's got a drawer in it. That one's made of metal. I want to get that one redone. It's a nice little bench. And then this thing, I initially thought was something homemade. And I wish it still had shit in it. This was a Army Corps of Engineers toolkit. And there's a list: auger, post hole, 6-inch, axe, chopping, single bit, 4-pound, bag, burlap, sand with binder. That's your list of everything that would have been in this kit. And I'm assuming they got a diagram here. I'm assuming that this is the layout of everything that would have been in here and like how you stacked it to make it all fit. Engineer board, Corps of Engineers, Pioneer Equipment Squad Engineer, for something or other, A2810-1, I'm assuming is the Army number for it. Come on, close. It's actually in really rough shape, but I didn't want to burn it because it's kind of neat. I'm assuming that they had these little cutouts on the side because I'd be willing to bet that's about the right width. I'm wondering if they made that box to like sit in the back of a Jeep, because that's about the right width for a Jeep. It might be a little wide. It's been a long time since I've been next to a Willys to remember how wide it is between the fenders and the back, but that just seems right. It's like that would fit in a Jeep. But yeah, there was so much shit in here. I found some cool stuff. I found a bunch of like old glass jars, and I found a 1-gallon glass Coke jug from the 50s. Just a bunch of, there was some cool stuff down here. All that's in the house now. I cleaned it up and took care of it. So yeah, this would have been where your animals were when this was actually a livestock barn. And then you can tell in the concrete there was a manure trough here. There was another one. Yeah, there was a manure trough there, and there was a manure trough here. And then right there, and there, and there, and there. And I think there was a row there, and there's a row there, and there was a row I swore there was a row here. Yeah, right there. Those were the pipes for the milking stanchions that got sawed off and gotten rid of years ago. So this floor is kind of a hodgepodge of shit. They didn't do a very good job of forming it off when they went in and filled in all the stuff for back when this was a milking parlor. And then this is the milk house, which was his office when he had a plumbing business out of here. And obviously this was built after the barn because the barn is fieldstone foundation and this is cinder block, so I'm gonna guess this is probably at least 50s. Late 40s, early 50s is when cinder blocks really started becoming a thing. Probably post World War II. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with that yet. It seems like a shame to get rid of it. American Standard plumbing fixtures, that's old. That's old. Like, I never did look for a date on it. Lithographed in USA, that tells you how old it's been since there's been a litho. I need to get it out of here before it turns to shit. I'm just scared to move it for fear of it falling apart. And then there's a little cabinet in here. This was probably in here back when they still had cows, because I bet they had like medication and whatever not in there. And then this would have been, when the bulk truck came, they'd shove their hose through here, and then there would have been a bulk tank here. And where that pipe is right there, they probably had a wash basin here. And everything drained right there. I would really like to find another stainless steel bulk tank and a wash basin and kind of make this back into a milk parlor, because it's kind of useless for anything else. Just to kind of make the barn legit again. And the problem you got with most milk parlors is they poured the floor, they put their fixtures in, they built the walls, and that's where that stuff's going to stay for the rest of its life, unless you A, knock the barn down, or B, cut the stuff apart and scrap it. This is a little different case because that door is not actually original. Originally this door was, they made a filler, and this door was about this wide, which was wide enough to get all the shit out when they wanted to not milk anymore. And then they framed the door narrower and put a standard, or put what back then would have been a standard door in, standard size door. And unfortunately, you're not going to get that lucky with everything I need is in, you know, you might be able to see it when I go outside, but there's a farm right down, literally like 100 yards down the road, that still has a fully outfitted milking parlor right down to the air compressor hanging on the wall for the pneumatic milkers. But his door is only that big, and you ain't getting any of that shit through that door. And that barn is in immaculate shape like this one, and I doubt they're tearing it down anytime soon. So, and then this stuff is for a project that's showing up here hopefully in a month or so, but you'll hear about that when the time comes. So yeah, that's the basement of the barn, and I'll walk you around back here. I liked it, still got all the original door handles and stuff in it. Pretty simple. It's just it's kind of fancy on the outside, but the inside is just an L bend, and then you latch it. They got holes here, you could have padlocked it or whatever you wanted to do, but pretty simple door handle. Oh, the other thing I should mention, since I'm standing here at the door, never seen a barn foundation built like this before. You gonna stay? Yeah. They built the foundation, stay open. They built the foundation with a taper to it. You can't tell on the outside the wall's straight up and down, but on the inside it's narrower at the top than it is at the bottom, and the inside's got a slight taper to it to give it a bigger footprint, which I also think is what helped this barn survive. And obviously I guess you probably saw this when I was in here before, but my guess is the front wall is crumbling a little. Well, you can tell the front wall is crumbling a little bit. This is going to have to be... Actually, the best thing to do is probably just do what they already did. They formed up, or they made a form, and they just poured a layer of concrete to kind of reinforce it. And the best thing to do would probably just be to bust all this shit off and start fresh. And come out here about yay far, form it all the way up, and pour concrete with some rebar in it to help hold that wall back. Because that's where your drainage issue came in. The freeze-thaw would push the wall in. And since the water couldn't get away, even when it wasn't a freeze-thaw, the mortar would always stay kind of damp and it would crumble, and this is what would happen to your wall. And gonna have to do some work on the floor on this thing. As you can see, it's kind of, the beams are kind of rotted a little bit, and the floor from the front door to right, it's kind of hard to tell because the bottom layer of boards is in better shape, but from like right about here forward, the floor is kind of rotten a little bit. Obviously, it's not so rotten you can't park shit in here, but you just kind of got to be leery of what your weight is. Typical of most bank barns, they let the gutter go to shit, and the water falls down and splashes inside underneath the door, and the floor rots. So that's all got to get fixed. And actually, the plan is, well, there's two plans. Firstly, that door is going to go away. I'm going to knock a hole in the wall over to here and put a, can't remember, Dad and I measured it out. I can't remember if that's 10 or 12 foot, but I'm going to put a slider in there so that I could park equipment down here, because I get like my baler fit in here, and my rake and my mower and my crimper and all that shit that you don't need any headroom for will all fit in here. And then when we do that, I'm going to go and make an I-beam frame to help support the barn since that part of the wall will be gone, which shouldn't be much of an issue because really all you're losing is 4 foot of wall. But still, that frame will be in there just for peace of mind. And then we'll do the same thing here, and then the plan is, long term, is to take the center bay out completely, and on those steel frames lay in some stress core concrete planks, which I believe it was 3 inches, or no, was it, no, 6 inch thick stress core concrete planks, 3 foot wide, 20 foot long, will support 6,000 pounds on a 20 foot free span. This will only be a 10 foot free span, because it'll be supported there in the center and at the back. So you'd probably be able to easily double that on a 10 foot span. And then right now I wouldn't want to park much more than, when the floor was new, I'd probably feel fairly safe parking my 66 in there, but that was about it. Now I wouldn't even want to try it, just mostly because of how it is right there at the door. I don't feel so bad about back in the back part. Floor's still fine back here, but you put some stress core concrete planks in there, I could park my 4150 in here and it'd be fine. So just trying to get a little bit more utility out of the barn doing that. So yeah, door there, concrete floor in the center bay, and everything. And really, unless you're standing inside the barn from the outside, it'll appear the same, although eventually it's going to get steel on the outside. It'll be steel over the wood, so that when you're inside, it'll still have the wood siding and it'll look like a barn, but it'll be steel on the outside for protection, because this thing needs to get sealed up, otherwise it really will go to shit. But this is the west side of it. And then the back. And I'd really fucked up. I should have took pictures of this place before. because when I bought it, you physically could not, well, you could get to where I was standing, but you would have had to fight to do it. There was a fence from the corner of that barn back to, I don't know, just off, because there's a concrete slab there, and that fence came to right about here, which is about the edge of the slab, and then it branched off and went every which direction, and there was like 4 paddocks they had fenced back here, because they had a horse at one point after the cattle, a long time after the cattle. That fence was all grown full of trees. This was all full of weeds and small trees. There used to be, I'm trying to visualize all this for you. I'm sorry if this video gets boring, but we're here, we might as well talk about it. Right about here, there was like a 10-foot deep by 20-foot long concrete foundation built into this hill for what I'm assuming must have been like a chicken coop or something at one point. There was a fence in between there, or in between that and this horse stable, and I'll show you the horse stable and the corn crib here in a minute. There's a lot to talk about here to get everybody back up to speed. And right here, there was literally a hole just big enough I could get to 77 and the brush hog through. And I had to get off of the seat and get down under the steering wheel to keep the tree branches from taking me off the tractor, because there was a tree here and there was a tree there, and this was so grown up with shit. It was terrible. And that was all cut, or the horse stable was all covered in vines. This side of the barn was luckily not covered in anything, but you couldn't get around the back of the barn because there was trees growing all the way up to that slab, grown over touching the barn. The back of the barn was all covered in vines. You physically could not walk behind the barn. There was so much shit growing up. And then there was a fence. You can see them stumps right there. There was trees there. There was a gate between the corner of the milking parlor, or not the milking parlor, the milk house, and those trees. And then there was a fence that went down along the road that was all grown into the trees. And it took, well, obviously I'm still working on it. It was just mind-blowing. And the thing about these old wooden barns, you can't let them get like that, because every time it rains, that wood gets wet. And if the sun can't get to it to dry it out, you've got all them vines on there, and that one is obviously still there because I can't get a hold of it to pull it down. I need to get a ladder. Well, now I actually got an extension ladder. I need to get that off of there. But you get all this growing up with vines, and the wood stays wet and the wood rots, and then the barn goes to shit. You can't let these old barns, or even old houses for that matter, get that grown up next to them, because they just go to shit in short order. But and also, neither of these sliders worked because there was vines growing up inside the track, and I got both sliders working now, but I love the old hardware on them. Almost fell. That track is probably not as old as the barn, but that track's been on there a while. I just took the time to put stars in the door hangers, and that was back when craftsmanship meant something, even on the simplest of things. And I got a little over 6 acres here total, and I ain't gonna walk back. I'd like to walk back there because there's two. See if I can get them in the frame. Right there off the end of my hand. I don't know if you can see them. There's 2 great big monster ass oak trees. They look big right here. You should be up to the butt of them. They're probably every bit of 4.5 foot at the base. But my guess is those were here probably before the house was. But I'm gonna had that wood logged. I'm gonna get it clear cut, and then eventually I want to pasture it and run cattle out here. Would be the plan. Well, actually I want to run cattle on the front half and put the back part to hay, And then all these pine trees are going to get, well, obviously everything's getting taken out except for those 2 big oak trees. Those are staying because they've been here long enough. They've earned their right to stay. And that'll probably be right on the fence line where the pasture is, and that'll split the pasture in the field. But those trees are coming out, and when they come out, that's going to get leveled off, and that's where I'm going to put my bins. That's the plan anyhow. The plan on them bins has changed 3 times since I bought them, but every time the plan gets better. This time they'll be at a house and not somewhere where I got to go babysit them. And to tell you how grown up this was, I lived here for a year before I knew that shed was there. It was all grown up with hedge apple, and I just so happened to be mowing my yard one day in the fall, and I turned just the right time and the sun was at just the right angle. I saw something glint inside all them damn trees. So I got off the tractor, worked my way in there. It's like, holy shit, there's a shed. And I guess they that was their hog shed back when the last family lived here. So, but this is the horse stable. Well, I say a horse stable. I don't think you're gonna get much more than a pony in here. It's kind of short. This was all, there was like 3 foot of straw in here. It was clear up to this hay bunk. And I got 2 barge wagon loads of straw out of here. And I don't, yeah, well, this wouldn't have been a stall. This would have been like your tack and storing your feed and whatnot. And then this was a stall. Obviously that was your door where you would have brought them in, and then this was a stall, and then there's a slider on the end and another door there. And this shit they put in, this isn't originally part of it. That was where they kept their horse. I still need to get in there and shovel all the crap out, but when I bought the place, you couldn't get to that slider because there was a tree right there and you couldn't get in there. And they got that door nailed shut, and I didn't have a place to get rid of the crap anyway because you couldn't get back in the woods to dump it because it was all grown up. Now that I do, I just really need to just bring the loader tractor over here and get it taken care of. I just haven't done it yet. But I'm really up in the air about what exactly I want to do with this building because it's kind of, it's I don't want to call it rough. Well, I'm going to do it. It's rough. Like right there, those posts are all rotted off. And that one you can, that one moves. But I can't bring myself to tear it down because it's part of the farm. Like the roof is gone to shit right there. You can tell, and there's obviously a hole in it. And it's not really good for anything because it's a horse stable. But I don't want to tear it down because it's part of the farm. But it's going to take a shit ton of money to fix it. So I don't know. I'm up in the air. It's obviously not going to get torn down unless it falls in, and if it stays standing long enough for me to have the money to fix it, it's going to stay around. And it's still in decent enough shape, and it's not that big of a building, and it's not that heavy, and there's not much snow load on it that I don't think it's got any danger of falling in. So we'll just have to see what happens with that one. But like I say, you can... Yeah, come on, close. Oh, well, that would help. Get that back there. There we go. This door is like, I've got to duck down to go in it because you'd smack your head right there on the door jamb. I don't think they were getting much more than a pony in either one of them stalls. And this thing's been around just as long as whenever they would have done any updates to the barn back in the day, because the track on that slider's got the same hardware on it. And that slider works. I've had it slid open partway anyhow, so. And then this is a single bunk crib with a little storage area here. This is in pretty good shape. This is actually in really good shape, except for the floor. I don't know if they had goats in here or what would have done it, but there's holes in the floor, and it's not rot. Something ate those damn holes in the floor, like, or walked on it enough to wear holes in the floor, because and it's right here. I don't know. The rest of it's in pretty good shape though, except for the siding, because they had all this in between the stable and here fenced in for their horses, and I'm guessing the horses and shit were rubbing up against the side of the shed and busting the wood all up, so it's going to need re-sided. But the roof on it's in good shape. It's got a tin roof on it, and I mean the rest of it's in it. This is definitely a savable barn or crib, shed, whatever you want to call it. I'll take you over here in the bunk real quick. It's just cool that everything's still got the old hardware on it. But this would have been the crib. And they had... all this stuff was in the rafters over on that, or, well, I guess up here in the rafters. But these are all the old shutters off the side of the house. Some of them, there's some of them in the shed I got behind my house. But most of the shutters are here, and then there's all this older wood that I kept around because you never know when you could use some old wood for a project and whatnot. But this is obviously the bunk where you would have put your ear corn. Wouldn't fit a whole hell of a lot in here. Maybe, I don't know, when they built this with the yields they had, you might have been lucky to fit 3 acres of corn in here, maybe 4 tops. I don't think you'd fit 5 acres of corn in here, even back in the, or even with the yield they had back then. But the door, you would have, there was a, well, it's easier to see from outside. So we'll go outside. Come on. There was, you got this door here, which obviously the hinges broke many moons ago, so it's just nailed shut. There's a door there, a door there, and they're not wide enough for an elevator, so I'm assuming you just shoveled the corn in there, which would have sucked because it's not that big of a crib, but that's still a lot of shoveling. It surprises me that there wasn't one like here or here, but that's original siding, and obviously it's never been cut, so they never had a door there. And then you would have just opened the door and shoveled it out to empty the crib. Lots of shoveling. I had right after Christmas, I brought a 1150 case dozer home from a friend's place and spent 3 days out here clearing more shit. Clearing up tops after they log is no fun whatsoever. It wasn't terrible. I came out here right after they did it, and the ground was frozen. I had 1600 in the grapple, and I built that burn pile, and that burn pile took me 3 days to build because everything is just, they don't give a shit. Everything's dropped on each other and tangled together, and you think you got everything cut up enough to grab on it with the grapple and get it pulled out, and then you get a hold of it, and somewhere you're pulling a whole tree because you didn't get that one cut, and it's just... But this right here, when they logged it, this area right here was where they staged everything, and this is where the vast majority of all the shit got stacked. So once I get further back, it ain't gonna be that bad, I hope. But the goal is to get this front part cleared up first and then work my way back and use. And then I'll have this area up here to build a burn pile again and not have to try to make a hole big enough to start a burn pile and work around it. And yeah, fun. Anyway, this little shed back here, not that there's anything exciting, but we're touring all the buildings, so we might as well do it. Got scrap stack there. I'll go around back. Like I say, it was grown up clear out to here, and you couldn't see that shed. Could not do it. There was a fence, or there was, well, my property line is here. Right about here-ish is my property line. And there was there was like sumac and just a bunch of nasty ass shit from here all the way to here. And last summer I tried cleaning it up by hand with a saw, and I spent 6 hours on it and cleared like a 10-foot swath, full depth of it. And I was like, nope, this ain't happening. So I know a guy that's got a big bobcat, track bobcat. I can't remember what model, but it's a monster. And he's got a 7-foot forestry mower for the front of it. And he said, for 200 bucks, I'll clear that out for you. He came out here with that skid steer, and in 3 hours, he had all this mowed off, all the way back around where that foundation was. The best 200 bucks I ever spent. But we were here, I was going in this shed. Yep, this is it. This is full of shit too. I need to shovel this out. It's actually not a bad little shed. It's in really good shape. Surprisingly, well, it's all tin, so there was really nothing on it to rot, and the roof's in good shape, so the wood stayed in good shape. But what I want to do is, and it's all going to depend. I got to get all these trees cleared out and figure out exactly where the property line is in this patch of shit, and do all the measuring and whatnot. But it'd be nice to like park the bin on one side or the other of it, and use this as like, have the moisture tester in there and any of the peripheral crap that gets associated with having a grain bin, and shove it in there and close it in and put good doors on it, and use that for kind of like a grain, yeah, whatever you need for having a grain bin. And this farm was originally just a tick over 40 acres, because I got, like I say, I got like 6 and 6.3, I think is what they'd advertise it as when I bought it, acres here. And then back here there's 30, they got it listed as 36 point something acres. This field went with the farm, and I'd love nothing more than to buy this field to put the farm back together. But they have it advertised for $270,000 or some shit like that. It comes out to tick over $7,400 an acre. And that is way too damn much for what this ground is. I mean, it's decent ground, but it lays wet. That swale right there drains into my property, which is what makes the damn wet spot behind the barn. I don't know, well, I'm sure you saw where that brush pile was sitting right straight behind the barn. It's sitting in the middle of a pond because all this field drains down to there. So you'd pay the $270,000 plus whatever the interest is. It needs $1,000 an acre at least in field tile, and then you'd have to buy an easement onto the neighbor's property to tie it into his tile, because there's nowhere to drain it to on this property. And then that doesn't count property taxes and insurance and whatever other expenses you'd have in it. So some quick math here. I did this once, but I can't remember what number I used to calculate it, so I'm going to do it again. So I'm just going to double check my numbers here. 7,400 an acre times 36 acres. That's $266,400. So, and I know they were asking 270 even, but we'll just use the 266,400. And you divide that by, I'm going to be generous and say you profit $200 an acre every year. You might be able to do that out in Iowa or Illinois where you got good ground and 200 bushel an acre corn is fairly common. This area, realistically, 175, 180 bushel an acre corn is what you can expect. We can grow 200 bushel an acre corn around here, but the year's got to be right and you're going to work for it. So $266,400 divided by $200, or no, sorry, $266,400, and then that's like $200 times 36 acres. So you're going to profit $7,200 an acre every year. That's not going to happen, but that's the number we're going to use. So $266,400 divided by 7,200. You're going to farm this farm for 37 years before you see a profit off of it. And that's just paying the principal on the loan. That's not paying the interest and the insurance and the taxes. So you could probably figure 45, 46 years you're going to have to farm this before the ground pays for itself. And that's being generous and making $200 an acre a year every year. This year, nobody made anything. So I cannot justify paying that kind of money, no matter how much I want this ground, to never see a dime off of it. And I don't know what the rule is around the rest of the country, but around here, when I was a kid, I always heard, if you're going to buy 20 acres, you better farm 100. And the 100 will pay for the 20. And that was when I was a little kid, and things have changed. And I bet now, if you're going to buy 20 acres, you better farm 150, 160, and the 150, 160 is going to pay for the 20. And I am not willing to risk everything just to buy a chunk of ground. I got a buddy that just bought 40 acres for $3,500 an acre. And he said after he figures all his expenses in, after he figured all the loan expenses, everything in for what he's got to pay in a year for that ground, that's going to be about the equivalent to $200 an acre in rent, which is still astronomical in this area. If you're paying $200 an acre in rent, more power to you. I'd never do it. But that's manageable if you had to do it, and it's 40 acres, it's flat ground, it's a nice field. I'd have gave that money for it, easy. That's not $7,400 an acre ground. That's not even $5,000 an acre ground. That's like, I would do $4,000 an acre, but I still wouldn't feel comfortable with it. And I mean, there's guys around here that'll pay 10 grand an acre for a field like that, but the only reason they'll pay 10 grand an acre for a field like that is so nobody else can farm it, and they can whip their dick out and say, look how big my dick is, look how much ground I farm. So anyway, this just showed up right after Christmas. My granddad's old New Idea hay loader. His family didn't actually buy it new. He got it in the 60s from I don't know if he bought it from a friend, or anyway, he bought it back in the 60s. And he always just liked it. And the barn he had it stored in, the brothers that lived at the farm died, and they sold the farm, so it got evicted from the barn. And it got drug out behind my grandparents' place, and it was sitting in the fence row. And Grandma said if I wanted it, I could have it. And that was 3 years ago. And right after Christmas, I was out there doing some fence row work and looked at it. It's like, I probably ought to get that out of there before a tree falls on it, smashes it to oblivion. So I drug it over here and set it in front of the barn for now. It's all there. Everything turns, it works. Just needs restored. So that's going to be a someday project, but for now it's just going to sit here in front of the barn and look cool, because it looks cool in front of the barn. That's why I parked it there. But anyway, I guess this video has gotten long enough. It's got to be it's got to be well over 30 minutes by now. But yeah, that's the barn. That's the place. So I guess I don't really know what else to talk about. That's really all I got for you right now. Typical buying a house. It's just one big project after another. Never ends. One piece at a time. So anyway, I guess that does it for this one. We'll catch you all on the next one.